Well, it's a well-known fact that League of Legends is a self-declared degenerate game. There are certainly good aspects of League. I mean, it wouldn't be the biggest game in the world if it was a genuinely terrible game with a terrible community. But there are definitely some questionable players and community members. And I may well be more questionable than the regular person. A different breed of questionable to what you might be thinking of, but questionable nonetheless. I am questionable in a way that makes any League player I talk to cringe, in a way that makes my old League playing friends feel the need to comment on how far I have seemingly fallen. That's right, I one-trick full AP Rakan mid. Oh dear, I'm exposing myself yet again on this channel. Yep, you heard me right. I one-trick full AP Rakan mid. A sentence which sounds like gibberish to non-gamers or even non-League players, but which makes every League player I've ever mentioned it to instantly groan and tell me what a terrible person I am. Am I terrible? I mean, I would say that they're overreacting, but this is definitely a unique playstyle to say the least, and a unique champion. In this video, I'll discuss my history with the game League of Legends, and the history of my eventual one-trick champion, Rakan. I'll then discuss the many reasons why I love Rakan as a champion, and how I think he's perfectly designed, specifically in how his gameplay perfectly captures the dramatic fantasy promised in his story. I'll then discuss how I play Rakan, and we'll discuss the builds and runes that I like, as well as how he is so versatile that he could potentially be played in every role in the game. Or at least most roles. At the end of it all, I hope that you will be as much of a Rakan fan as I am. Also, although there isn't any particular trigger warning for this video, maybe don't watch it if you're upset by 1. Rakan mid, and or 2. Poor League gameplay. I exclusively play draft games, which means I'm unranked, but over the course of my League career, I believe I've been matched with players varying from bronze to emerald, so let's just say I'm not an elo god. I play for fun, not for LP, and that should be obvious from the fact that I play AP Rakan mid. So with that, let's get into it. My history with League begins in 2017 when I changed high schools. At my previous high school, Overwatch had been the only thing keeping me going, and I was, I believe, borderline clinically addicted to Overwatch. However, Overwatch wasn't a huge thing among the gamers in my year group at my new high school. No, League was where it was at for them. They tried to convince me to play League many times over 2017, and although I did try a few times, I had absolutely no clue how MOBAs worked, and found the difference in movement systems, especially between Overwatch and League, way too hard to get my head around. It's well known that League has a very steep learning curve, and my experience was no different. As I said, I was initially very resistant to playing League, but all of my friends played it and no one played Overwatch. Even my old Overwatch friends from around the country had started migrating to League as Overwatch experienced the start of its downfall from 2017 to 2019. And it's obviously far more fun to play with friends than without. Hence, I started to play League more. The first thing I remember playing was Nocturne Top with Ghost. How did that happen? I have no clue, but it did happen. I also remember that I had no clue how runes worked initially, so once upon a time I, by complete accident, ended up playing Sona with Press the Attack. My friends were suitably horrified. The last memory I have from my early learning of League was being forced to play jungle because no one else in my friend group wanted to do it. But I had literally no clue how the jungle worked, and ran around as base Kayn waiting for camps to respawn and never ganking the whole game. After that game, my friends told me to never play jungle again. I watched a whole bunch of jungle tutorials and spent about a year or two of my League career only playing jungle, so, well, let's just say I learnt from that experience. The last time I remember playing Overwatch on a regular basis was about mid to late 2019, so this must have been around the same time I started playing League in earnest. The first mains I had were Alawi top and Warwick jungle, and I quickly migrated to playing Poppy support back in the old days when that was super powerful. At one point I had a 70% win rate on Poppy support. This led to me, actually playing more support, and I had to pick up something other than Poppy, hence Rakan. My rotating group of teammate friends at this point meant that I ended up in a position where I played Poppy support and jungle and poorly top, Alawi top, Warwick jungle, Kindred jungle at a mediocre level, and Rakan support. I still enjoy playing Warwick, Poppy and Alawi, although I obviously don't play them nearly as much as I used to. My obsession with neutral objectives and ganking from when I was a jungler has stuck around, and I genuinely think that my stints as a top laner, jungler and support have given me tons of knowledge of the game and different roles, which has really helped my understanding of the game. Anyway, I found that I really enjoyed playing Rakan. However, there was a problem. Rakan is designed to be played with Xayah, right? And as with many Rakan mains, I love Xayah and want to play with Xayah mains. But there are only so many of them, and every time I would hover Rakan in Champ Select and the ADC wouldn't hover Xayah, hurt my heart. But then I watched an Exel video on off-meta strategies, Exel being another person who inspired my channel for those of you keeping track, and he mentioned something amazing. Rakan mid. Playing Rakan mid meant that I got to freak people out who underestimated me. It meant that I got to learn a new role with a champion I already knew how to play, and it meant that I didn't have to suffer the heartbreak of not being with a Xayah every single game. Hence, I tried it. I was obviously initially very bad at mid, but I've watched some guides and learnt more, and of course, that was far easier considering I'd already learnt the champion. So eventually I migrated to an exclusively Rakan mid full AP playstyle. These days, like I said, I almost exclusively play AP Rakan mid, and have done so since roughly the start of 2022. In fact, I have well over 700,000 points on Rakan, most of it being Rakan mid. I occasionally play Rakan support or top, and still fall back on my previous mains of Alawi, Warwick and Poppy when I need to switch to a different role or am in the mood. I can also play Kindred passably. When I need to pick up someone else mid, I play Azir or Galio, and when I am in that dreaded position of being auto-filled ADC, I either do another questionable thing of playing Kindred ADC, or I play my love Xayah. I like to think I'm relatively versatile for a one-trick. So, with my history over, let's talk about the history of the other party in this video, Rakan. Rakan was released in 2017. Specifically, he was released on the 19th of April along with his partner Xayah, making them the first champions released in 2017, and I believe the 135th and 136th champion in League. Rakan's abilities haven't actually been changed since he was released, outside of the obvious number and balance changes, so let's run through them. His passive is Fey Feathers. He periodically generates a shield that lasts until broken. Hitting an enemy champion with a basic attack or ability reduces the cooldown by 1 second. If the shield takes some damage but isn't broken, after being out of combat for several seconds, it will regenerate. He also has a second passive with Xayah, Lover's Leap. When one is recalling, the other can grab on and the two can recall together, which can reduce the second person's recall by many precious seconds, leading to some potentially sick outplays. He also receives the bonus damage, movement speed and attack speed from Xayah's W, Deadly Plumage. Rakan's Q is Gleaming Quill. He throws out a feather line skill shot, and if it hits an enemy champion, it damages them and creates a healing aura around Rakan. The healing aura will trigger after a few seconds and heal everyone in the area, or it can be triggered earlier if an allied champion walks into range of it, or, the more likely scenario, if Rakan runs into the allied champion, because support players know that their teammates always run away from heals, like they'd rather die instead. Rakan's W is Grand Entrance. He dashes and, after a delay, knocks up enemies in the area. This dash, and thus the CC, can be interrupted by enemy CC. Rakan's E is Battle Dance. He dashes to an allied champion and gives them a shield. It can be cast a second time in a short period, and he can dash further towards Xayah. Rakan's ultimate is the quickness. He gains movement speed and will charm any enemy champion he runs into for a few seconds. After running into a first enemy champion, he gains an extra decaying move speed bonus. So yeah, Rakan's kit is relatively simple. I think it's shown its strengths, since it hasn't been changed outside of number adjustments in the 8 years since his release. He's in a pretty good spot right now, and almost always is. He's one of the few champions who is good in both solo queue and professional play. His kit makes him versatile enough for solo queue, while he, of course, obviously shines best when his team is coordinated, hence his strength in pro play. If I was to change one thing about his kit, I would make his W dash unstoppable. However, I do realise that although this would reduce a lot of the frustration a player gets while playing him, it would also make him broken. Rakan and Xayah were released with a short cinematic, Wild Magic, which showed them restoring the wild magic to a region of Ionia, fighting against Zed. It's probably my favourite League cinematic, although I am of course biased. It shows their kits and personalities well, as well as giving a condensed introduction to their story, relationship to each other, and their ideology. They're all about ensuring that Ionia's magic remains free, which makes sense since they're Vastaya, and Xayah will stop at nothing to do this, even sacrificing herself. Rakan, on the other hand, is absolutely devoted to Xayah, and although he may not sacrifice himself for their cause, he would sacrifice himself for her, which is basically the same thing. Now onto Rakan's general lore. As with all champions, he has an overview on his page on the League website, so I'll summarise it for you. Rakan and Xayah are Lothan Vastaya, half-bird people for those of you who don't follow the League lore. Now, theoretically, both of them have 2 full wings and are fully capable of flight. However, in the game and kind of in the lore, these wings are disguised as their cloaks, which are single wings, a reference to birds in Asian and I believe specifically Chinese mythology, who only have 1 wing each and can only fly with the help of their partner or their soulmate. Very cute. The Vastaya have a very strong connection to magic and nature, so when humans started moving in and dampening this magic, it of course uprooted them and probably caused a lot of pain. Hence, different ideologies emerged on how to deal with this. Rakan's idea was that humans could be convinced to free magic if they could start to appreciate it, but this got him basically thrown out of his tribe, and he wandered with little purpose as an entertainer. At which point he met Xayah, and she was, in a very cliché moment, the only one who had been able to resist his charms. He found out that she was a rebel, determined to get all of the Vastayan lands back, and he joined her on her journey, where the two fought together and became the real definition of opposites attract, even though they seemed perfectly incompatible. For instance, Rakan would forget Xayah's plans, hence they pledged themselves to each other. This is the specific language used in his bio, and this is important to consider. Vastayan definitions of love and relationships are different to ours, as are the interpretations the community have of them. Some people interpret this as Rakan and Xayah just being lovers, some people think they are essentially engaged, and others think they're basically married. I lie somewhere between the last two. Basically, the only thing we really know is they're soulmates. Anyway, Rakan's bio finishes up by contrasting their worldviews. Xayah sees things in black and white, while Rakan believes that mortals can be redeemed. But, despite these differences, their love for each other will keep them going. And it also says that Xayah has helped him find purpose in life, which is very nice. So yeah, that's Rakan basically. He obviously has different lore in different skins, specifically Star Guardian, but that isn't really a consideration of this video, and while many a person has gushed about Star Guardian Rakan and Xayah online, specifically TB Skyen, I haven't seen anyone gush about base Rakan in general, so here we are. Now let's move on to why I love Rakan so much in terms of design and gameplay. Well, you should probably know already, but let's discuss it more. First, his design. Vastaya are cool in general, and I like birds. Bird people with an inbuilt soulmates mechanic? Very snazzy. There are obviously a few ways in which he could be changed to be more interesting, for instance having a greater contrast with Xayah, more animalistic features, etc., but overall his design is pretty good. The yellow is bright and reflects his personality and his nature as an entertainer. His clothes are simple and easy to move in like a bard, and he's shirtless since, well, he is the charmer. The skulls on his belt and his obviously magical cloak, however, suggest that he's far more than just a bard. He could be mistaken as a human out of the corner of your eye if he hides his feet and tail under his cloak, but he's still clearly a Vastaya at second glance, showing how he wants to help mortals see the brilliance of magic while at the end of the day being devoted to his people and Xayah. His tail, although somewhat more lion-like than bird-like, evokes a peacock, one of the inspirations for his design, and adds some visual interest and further contrast between him and Xayah, as well as a flair in his animations. Speaking of his animations, they're flowy and carefree with tons of pizzazz and elegance. Despite him saying in a voice line that he wants shoes, his bird feet are fully exposed, showing his connection to the earth and to his Vastayan nature. And his voice lines are, of course, brilliant. He's got a bright personality and banters with Xayah constantly, which is very fun. I mean, I know some people hate how much he talks and how much the two of them talk in general, but I think it's fun. He comes off as a complete ditz, but it's obvious that he does a lot of it to amuse Xayah, and as his bio says, he is far more competent and intelligent than he lets on. So yeah, his design, animations and voice lines are pretty cool. I love the combination of the wings, tail, ears and feet, making him more animalistic than most Vastaya in this game. My favourite part is how both he and Xayah have some of each other's feathers at their shoulder, reinforcing the soulmate aspect of their storyline. Now let's move on to his gameplay. I think Rakan is one of the characters in League whose gameplay best reinforces their dramatic fantasy, up there with several of my other favourite characters like Warwick, Poppy and Alawi, and others like Fiddlesticks, Galio and Pike. And I think the fact that he's rarely, if ever, brought up when discussing characters who perfectly embody their dramatic fantasy is really sad. First, his gameplay is super flashy. He's very mobile and has great playmaking ability, and also, often in my experience, thrives in chaotic situations where you, the player, makes seemingly rash but surprisingly well-considered decisions. This mobility makes him fun and, like I said, flashy, which in my opinion is the embodiment of his personality, especially in contrast to Xayah. His W is the perfect example of this. He could theoretically just throw a projectile that knocks up people, but instead he throws his entire body into it, dramatically pauses, and jumps up with the victims. In fact, all of his animations are excessively dramatic and filled with personality. I'd really recommend looking at them in an animation viewer because they're just super fun, and of course they do have the classic squash and stretch. Alright, next. Although he is a flashy playmaker, Rakan is also insanely versatile and has tons of utility, a more understated supportive nature which reflects how, yes, he is the flashy one of the duo, but he will also quietly support Xayah when needed. He has heals, shields, mobility which allows him to bait enemies and fulfill his role as a catcher, and he has tons of CC. He also has a large variety of build paths, full AP, mobility, tanky, enchanter. Tons of things can work, which is another reason I love him. Next, he is supportive and selfless. I mean, obviously he's supportive, he's literally a support, but he's also selfless. His E literally puts him in front of the person he's shielding, so many a Rakan in-game has taken a shot for their teammates. Using his W to peel also puts him closer to the enemy, as does his ultimate, often making him the salient target rather than his allies, and thus resulting in many a Rakan sacrificing themselves for their teammates. This selflessness is even baked into his Q, which only procs before it's charged if he's near a teammate. Basically, Rakan can't instantly heal himself, but he can instantly heal others. It's almost like it's waiting for him to be with an ally. And this goes perfectly with his lore. Willingness to sacrifice himself for Xayah and dive into immense danger to save her. He literally takes the full blast of Nico's ultimate for her in the Star Guardian cinematic and takes all of her darkness in that universe so that she can be purified. Next, he is chaotic. Obviously, like I said, he thrives in chaos, and the fact that he has so much mobility makes things sometimes seem like a blur of adrenaline. He's also great for follow-up engage, showing how he isn't a leader but a follower, in this case obviously a follower of Xayah. Rakan often isn't tanky enough to fully engage himself, and he thrives in situations where someone else on his team has applied initial CC and he can jump in with his W and R before returning to peel for his backline. Sure, he can initiate, but his follow-up CC is impeccable. He's also very good at getting there in the nick of time, especially with his E and of course his mobility, and many a clip exists of him saving someone just at the moment they would have died. This is even seen in his cinematics, using his E to save Xayah in the nick of time first in Wild Magic and second in the Star Guardian cinematic. And lastly, of course, he is protective. 2 of his 4 abilities are about protecting and/or healing allies. His passive is about protecting himself, which allows him to survive and protect others more, and his W and R are great for peeling for his backline and setting up their attacks. Brilliant. I don't think anything else needs to be said. Playing Rakan gets you in the mindset of being Rakan, in the way that only happens with champions whose gameplay perfectly reflects their dramatic fantasies. Ahem, like Warwick. When I play Rakan, I am chaotic, selfless, and supportive. I am flashy and somewhat full of myself, and I become a go-with-the-flow kind of person. Some things completely different from how I am in real life. And isn't that escapism what video games are really about? Not to mention that this clearly was a good design decision, since he hasn't been changed since release. Also, playing Rakan makes me even more untiltable than I usually am, because, well, Rakan is untiltable. Now let's talk about how I play Rakan, because you should know by now that I don't play him as a meta support. Disclaimer, please do keep in mind that, as I said earlier, I only play draft and I have no clue what my rank is. I don't have any delusions that any of these things are the best way to play Rakan, they're just what works for me and what I have fun with. So let's take a look. Also, warning in advance, I play with the locked screen. Why? I genuinely don't know, I've always played that way, but I know it's controversial. As I said, I almost exclusively play AP Rakan mid. These are the runes I take almost every game. First, Dark Harvest as your keystone. I find Dark Harvest super fun. I enjoy stacking infinitely, and sometimes you've just got a large number of stacks and you punch someone and they just blow up, which is hilarious. Rakan's Q is decent for proccing Dark Harvest. You can also take Electrocute, and I did play with Electrocute for quite a while. It feels like it has a greater impact, of course, but it also falls off late game. Electrocute is super easy to proc with a WQ auto. Cheap Shot, Taste of Blood, and Sudden Impact are all fine in my opinion. Rakan works well with Cheap Shot and Sudden Impact, and I'll never complain about extra healing with Taste of Blood, but I usually take Sudden Impact. Again, Zombie Ward, Ghost Poro, and Eyeball Collection are all fine. The first 2 are more supportive, but I usually take Eyeball Collection for more damage. Unfortunately, after I wrote this, the Domination tree was changed, and those runes don't exist anymore. I don't really like any of the new ward runes, but I take 6th Sense for the extra vision control. Yet again, Treasure, Relentless, and Ultimate Hunter could all be good. I usually take Ultimate Hunter since I obviously like the ultimate cooldown. My ultimate sometimes gets down to like 30 to 45 seconds, which is pretty good. Relentless Hunter would also be good for the movement speed. The fact that so many different runes can work on Rakan is just a testament to his versatility, which I think is great. Alright, onto the secondary runes. You can take any tree, but I take Sorcery. And I take Mana Flow Band and Celerity. Celerity because movement speed is great on Rakan as a catcher and for rotations, and Mana Flow Band because he can be heavy on mana. Almost all of these secondary runes would work well for him, however I would point out Gathering Storm for damage, Water Walking for ganking, and Scorch for extra damage. Now the stats runes. You can pretty much take whatever you want. I usually take ability haste, adaptive damage, and bonus health. This is the rune page that I take whenever I play Rakan, regardless of whether I play him support, top, or mid. However, I do have a second Rakan page I used to use for support, using Guardian, Font of Life, Second Wind, and Revitalize, with secondaries Zombie Ward and Ultimate Hunter, but I obviously don't do that anymore because I'm well and truly converted to the AP Rakan lifestyle. I have no clue if that page is still good or was ever good actually. Mind you, that goes for my main page too. In true Rakan fashion, I go with the flow. Speaking of my build, like I said, go with the flow. I have a group of items that I favour and I build them in order based on the enemy team and game state, and of course my mood and vibes. Is that a bad way to build in League? Yes. Do I have fun doing it? Yes. Do some of my teammates hate it and some of them love it? Also yes. I obviously start with Doran's Ring and health potions and take Ignite and Flash, and on my first back I buy boots if the lane is going well, or Tear if it's going poorly and or the enemy team has lots of burst, or if I'm just having more mana issues than usual. From there I build any of the following items as I see fit. For boots, I take either Symbiotic Souls or Sorcerer's Shoes. The magic pen from Sorcerer's is obviously nice, but I usually favour the empowered recall from Symbiotic Souls and the bonus out of combat movement speed they give when upgraded. I also will take Merc Treads if needed, although very, very rarely. As far as Tear, like I said, I take it if I'm burning too much mana in lane or if the enemy has lots of burst that's annoying me, and I build it into Archangels and Seraphs. Could I build Winter's Approach? Sure, and I think it's the more common item to build on Rakan out of Tear, but I want the AP, so I'm gonna get it. Two of my common first items outside of Archangels are Morellos and Malignance. Malignance is obviously nice for Rakan. It has ultimate and ability haste, ability power, mana, and does great damage with your ultimate and reduces enemy magic resist. This is all great, and of course is even better if you have tons of magic damage on the rest of your team. Morellos I only get if the enemy team has tons of healing. The stats, which are ability power, health, and ability haste, are all good for Rakan. After Malignance and Archangels or Morellos if those were needed, I build basically based on vibes and how the game is going. I'll take anything out of all of these. Rocket Belt for burst damage, Cosmic Drive for movement speed, Blackfire or Liandry's for burn, Void Star for magic pen, Rabadon's for AP, Shadow Flame for crit and magic pen, and Nash's Tooth and Lichbane for auto attack damage, spell weaving, etc. I tend to lean towards Shadow Flame and either Cosmic Drive or Nash's Tooth, but I think that literally any AP item could work on Rakan. I might take Crypt Bloom if I'm going super poorly and want to focus on supporting, or if I'm playing support. I used to take Riftmaker, but after it was downgraded from a mythic item, it didn't feel as impactful. I also used to take Storm Surge, but it's often hard to proc on Rakan, or at least with my skill level and the number of tanks around right now. Similarly, I don't build Dawncore, Magi's, and Zhonya's since I don't feel like I could get much use out of them with my playstyle and skill level. When I'm feeling spicy, I particularly like building the combination of Nash's, Lichbane, and Guinsoo's, then run up to people and punch them with Dark Harvest. It's very demonic. Is it a good build? Almost certainly not, but it is very fun. I've become a convert to the Nash's Tooth Lichbane lifestyle. Alright, let's talk Rakan mid. First, playstyle. The most important thing is not getting tilted, because believe me, your teammates will be tilted because you picked Rakan mid, so there's no point in you also getting tilted. Here's how I run it. At the start of the game, I always send a message to the jungler, telling them that they can farm my mid laner. Rakan is brilliant in 2v2 situations and is great at setting up and following up ganks. He's also a great anti-carry, so it's a legitimately great strategy to get your jungler fed off your mid laner if your jungler in draft is actually willing to gank a Rakan mid. Which is one of the reasons I send the message. It shows that I'm actually legitimate about winning the game. If they are willing, you can pretty much win the game off being a duo. In lane, I focus on farming as much as possible, which takes a lot of brain power since I'm really bad at farming. You will have low CS with this playstyle, so you need to build up some money quickly. I take my W at level 1 and look for an engage onto the opponent. The W is good damage and CC and lets you put in a few auto attacks afterwards, especially if they're melee. This is an even better combo at level 2 when you take your Q, and can WQ auto to get surprising damage in and also heal yourself. Your passive is also brilliant in lane and in general and mitigates so much damage. At level 3 I take a second point in my W. Unless your jungler is ganking you tons really early, your E is useless, and you're better off getting the extra damage from your W. From level 3 onwards, I focus on farming to get to level 6 as soon as possible, but I keep my eye out for 2 side opportunities. First, to poke down my laner and potentially kill them, and second, to help my jungler with any skirmishes they have in the river/jungle and with Void Grubs, Rift Herald and Dragons, especially with the new feats of strength system. My past as a jungler has made me even more obsessed with these objectives than most people, hence I do my best to help with them because all junglers know that no one else ever will. Keep in mind that at this point of the game and throughout the whole game, your laner will likely be pretty convinced they can kill you, especially if they're playing an assassin, a diver, or someone like Yasuo. People aren't used to playing against Rakan mid, so they forget how much damage he does and also how much peel he has, and how self-sufficient he can be. Hence, I have had many a kill under tower from people diving me and forgetting I have my W, my Q, my passive, and ignite. It's hilarious. However, do keep in mind that one crucial goal in the early game is to not feed your laner. If you feed your laner, well, not only are they fed and you're behind, but your team also gets tilted and starts yelling at you about Rakan mid. Mind you, they'll blame you for anything. You could absolutely kill the early game, but as soon as literally anything under the sun goes wrong, it's your fault for playing Rakan mid. The life of an off-meta player. If it's a hard matchup, I stay safe and soak up XP while using my Q to try and stack my mana flow band until I get to level 6. It's okay to miss a bit of gold and poke on your laner in order to survive. After level 6, it's time to roam pretty much the entire game. I routinely gank both top and bot when they're in a good position, keep an eye out for fights in the jungle and river, stick around objectives, and return to mid lane when I need to clear a wave or protect the tower. Speaking of, your mid tower will likely be taken, but it's a small price to pay for getting your other lanes ahead. With the feats of strength, your main goal is making sure it's not the first tower taken. After that, you're good. From this point on, I obviously adapt to the game state, including in my item build. If I'm far ahead, I might push a side lane, and if I'm far behind, I will farm and become a second support for my ADC. This is the beauty of Rakan. He is so versatile. He can become a tank, a carry, an assassin, a split pusher, or even a support. I love versatile champions, which is one reason I play so much Poppy. So yeah, that's the basics of my playstyle. Now let's talk about matchups. I've sorted all of the champions you are likely to or may encounter in mid lane into easy, medium, and difficult matchups, and will give some notes. The medium level matchups tend to be skill matchups. However, this has a few disclaimers. First, these are all based on my specific experiences with people playing these characters and aren't necessarily informed by theoretical matchup difficulty. Second, there are some champions I haven't encountered enough to form a proper opinion on. These champions are Anivia, Azir, Brand, Corki, Karma, Lysandra, and Ziggs. I feel that almost all of these would be skill matchups, although Brand is very annoying and Anivia and Azir's range advantages is something that could be difficult to deal with. The one time I remember playing against an Anivia, I don't think I had any major issues. The third disclaimer is that I haven't had a chance to play against Mel yet. My computer's been broken. The problem with Mel is that right now her damage is just so high in general, and she's got the execute on her passive, which is a big issue because Rakan usually gets out of fights on a single tick of health, right? With the execute you can't do that. So it's going to make your life a lot harder, but that's the case for everyone. Alright, onto the easy champions. Rakan, in my experience, does very well into characters with little mobility and characters who rely on jumping towards you or diving on top of you. The latter category, in terms of easy champions, includes Echo, Katarina, Pantheon, Yasuo, and Yone, All of these characters have abilities that bring them closer to you as part of their engage, and this is brilliant for Rakan because you just counter-engage with your WQ combo and walk away unscathed for the most part. These are also champions who are easy to bait into trying to kill you under your own tower. None of them pose particular threats as long as you're decent at managing your cooldowns and dodging skill shots. The champions who have mobility on this list are a pain, since they can dodge your W, but if they've used their mobility to engage, they don't have it anymore. So if you play them smart, they're easy. In terms of other characters with this jump onto you or dive playstyle, Akali, Diana, Fizz, Irelia, Qiyana, Sylas, and Tristana are all medium matchups in my opinion. Akali, Sylas, and Qiyana are all borderline easy and just have annoying parts of their kit. Akali's Shroud and Ultimate, Sylas's CC and ability to steal your ult, and Qiyana's invisibility. Fizz's untargetability is really annoying and his damage is high. Irelia dashes a lot, and Diana has high damage. Tristana also outranges you, but all of these are skill matchups. The only champions who can dive you who I would consider hard are LeBlanc, Talon, and Zed. Zed's ability to switch between his shadows is annoying but can be outplayed when it's on cooldown. Talon's damage is high and his parkour is a big pain. LeBlanc's ability to blink backwards and her high damage pose threats, but again, all of these matchups can be won if played well, or if you focus on roaming. Now onto champions with no mobility or low mobility. Aurelion, Sol, Galio, Gragas, Hui, Veigar, and Vel'Koz are all pretty easy matchups. Asol, Gragas, Hui, Veigar, and Vel'Koz can all be jumped onto, and as long as you dodge their singular piece of CC, you can go to town on them. Asol's Q is cancelled by your W, and you can also cancel Gragas's dashes. Galio seems like he would be hard since he has CC and a magic shield, but you outrange him and his CC is easy to dodge with your W or E. There are two special cases here. Both Kassadin and Zoe are easy matchups pre-level 6, but after they get their level 6 mobility, they are medium matchups. Just make sure you don't feed them. Ahri, Aurora, Ezreal, Lux, Malphite, Neeko, Ryze, Victor, Seraphine, Talia, Twisted Fate, Vex, and Xerath are all non-mobile or low mobility champions who are medium or skill matchups. Xerath, Lux, Ryze, Talia, Victor, and TF have annoying poke, but if you dodge it you should be fine, and roaming works well against them. Just be mindful of the Ryze, Talia, and TF ults. Talia's anti-dash zone is annoying, but I've rarely suffered hugely against it. Malphite has annoying poke, and you can't really kill him, but he can't really kill you either, so yeah. With Neeko you have to be mindful of her snare going through minions, and of her passive, but otherwise she's simple, and you can heal off her clone, which is nice. Ezreal and Aurora have some mobility you can bait and then kill them. They just, again, have annoying poke and high damage. Aurora's damage especially is just way too high. Ahri is relatively easy if you dodge her charm outside of her ult, which can make it easy for her to dodge your engage. Vex has her fear shield, which is annoying, but if the fear is used attacking, you can just dodge it and engage. Her ult brings her right to you, which means you can get easy kills under tower. Seraphine is annoying, but if you dodge her E, which really affects your W, then you're good to go, just buy anti-heal. Akshan, Ashe, Cassiopeia, Lucian, Malzahar, Naafiri, Orianna, Syndra, and Vladimir are the other hard matchups on this list. Akshan outranges you, his stealth is a pain, he can swing away to avoid your engage, and he does a lot of damage. It's pretty much impossible to 1v1 him. Ashe has her auto attack slows, which really hinder your ability to engage or to get literally anything done. Rakan mid thrives in being able to get in and get out, but these slows just destroy your ability to do that. She also has her ult, which she can use to interrupt your engage. Cassiopeia is a champion I think I've only played like 2 games against, but she is a well-known counter to Rakan. Not only does she have high poke damage and higher range than him, she also has a grounding zone which destroys his mobility, and her R can be used to stop his engage. Lucian has mobility, outranges you, and does high damage. He's not actually that hard, he's just so annoying that I bumped him up a tier. You can't kill him, but he can't really kill you either. Malzahar is another one that isn't actually that hard. Again, he can't really kill you, but he is super annoying. He has a spell shield, which thankfully has a decently long cooldown and is relatively easy to proc with your Q. However, he also has his voidlings who block your Q, so yeah, annoying. You can cancel his ult if you aren't the person getting ulted, which is an upside. Neferi is similar to Malzahar but more annoying. It's relatively easy to disengage her engage with your W, however she's a pain in lane with her poke which goes through minions and when her dogs block your Q, so it's hard to sustain against her. Orianna is another champion who outranges you and deals lots of damage, but she has low mobility, so if you get onto her you should be okay. Similarly, Syndra has high damage but no mobility. It's a good idea to get onto her, but make sure you bait out her stun first, since she can use it easily to cancel your W, which is a massive pain. Finally, Vlad has his obvious untarget ability, and outside of that his sustain and damage are high. Rakan mid does well when you can poke the enemy down through repeated WQ auto trades until the final trade kills them, but you can't do that against Vlad. He can't really kill you either, but he's annoying enough for me to put him up here. I usually ban Neferi, Ahri or Zed. Zed and Ahri are both popular champions, so even though they're not the hardest matchups, they are worth banning. Playing against Neferi and her dogs makes me want to die, hence why I ban her. However, lately I have been banning Victor and Aurora more. You can beat both, but they're the most annoying of the low mobility medium matchups, and both of them are quite popular right now. Aurora because she's new and does lots of damage, and Victor because of his visual update and arcane. Okay, so that's Rakan mid. What about Rakan in other lanes? Well, I hopefully don't need to tell you that he's a very good support. When I play him support, I play him full AP and take Realm Spike on my support item for more damage. It's also really good for stacking Dark Harvest. However, of course, there are also Enchanter and Tank support builds, which I won't discuss here because they're really easy to find online. Rakan top also works well. I prefer Rakan mid to Rakan top since mid gives you more control over the map and the ability to join fights at objectives on both the top and bot sides of the map. Top gives you less roaming ability and most top laners have good sustain, which means you can't kill them. However, most top laners also tend to have lower range, so you outrange a lot of them and most of them can't kill you either. It's a decent alternative to mid, although I would probably rather play support than top. Now, jungle. Rakan jungle is a known strategy. He basically plays like a perma roaming support Rakan. Rakan's clear speed is obviously low, although the jungle pets have made this better, and he can't heal off jungle camps outside of Baron, Dragon, etc. Jungle Rakan is, like I said, best for perma ganking, and most people who play Jungle Rakan take support items and runes. That said, his ganks are really good, and he has high utility and zone control. I don't think Rakan Jungle offers anything that Rakan Mid doesn't. Now for the really theoretical one. Could you play Rakan ADC? Well, I mean, you can do anything, but would it be any good? Look, let's just say it would be a struggle. Rakan ADC guides are obviously pretty much non-existent, and auto-generating build sites seem to get confused between Rakan ADC and Rakan support, since they provide the exact same runes and builds that you would build as a support. There is this one person running around on Reddit who apparently hit diamond with a Rakan ADC build, or more like APC since they build AP, duh. Jaded, of course, got flamed a lot by teammates, but less so when those teammates saw their match history, which has lots of wins, a good KDA, etc. They apparently took Electrocute, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Ultimate Hunter, Shield Bash, and Revitalize for runes, buy a Dark Seal, Sorcerer's Shoes, and Rod of Ages, Lichbane or Crypt Bloom, and Banshee's Veil if needed. Apparently Moonstone was a potential 3rd or 4th item if needed. So yeah, a pretty well-rounded AP build with some healing utility, mana, and a tad of tankiness. I reached out to them since at the time I initially wrote this script they hadn't played many games, and they explained that in 2024 and 2025 Rakan ADC doesn't have as much of an impact because of the prevalence of tank champions who he struggles against. However, they did share what they've been doing this season. At this point, which was early January, they had played a good number of Rakan ADC games, and this was going pretty well, having at this point climbed to Emerald with a 60 to 70% win rate on Rakan ADC. The new build is Magi's, Zhonya's and Shadowflame, with Swifties for boots and Zeke's Abyssal Mask, Locket of the Iron Solari and Aegis of the Legion as situational 5th and 6th items. I suggested Liandry's to help deal with tanks, although Shadowflame would help with tanks as well, and they didn't have any opinions about Liandry's. But what about Rakan ADC, as in actual AD? Well, one person in the comments of that Reddit post was saying that they were running Blade of the Ruined King attack speed Rakan top in 2022 and it was broken. And this could work. I mean, you know from the fact that I enjoy building both Lichbane and Nash's Tooth that I am indeed fond of Rakan having weirdly powerful auto attacks. So therefore I propose 2 options for runes. First, a full attack speed page with lethal tempo. 4 precision keystones, press the attack and fleet footwork could both work. Press the attack would be good for extra damage and fleet footwork for movement speed and sustain. I would then probably take Triumph, Legend Alacrity and Coup de Grace. For secondaries, you could go with pretty much any rune tree, but I would take Eyeball Collection and Ultimate Hunter, plus attack speed, movement speed, and health for stats. I tend towards Ignite Flash, so would take that, but Heal, Cleanse, or Ghost could also work. This setup would be best for maximum attack speed. Alternatively, you can continue to take Dark Harvest or Electrocute as I was talking about earlier. Electrocute is obviously good for burst, but less effective if you're not building Storm Surge. Dark Harvest would be good for making your auto attacks even more effective, and of course gives you the ramping damage which helps you stay relevant. As far as items, I would of course go for Lichbane and Nash's Tooth. Lichbane doesn't actually give attack speed, but does empower your auto attacks, and does give movement speed and AP, which are useful for your hybrid damage. As far as boots, Berserker's Greaves are obvious, with an optional upgrade to Zephyr. I think that you could build almost any attack speed item or damage item here. I would personally tend towards Static Shiv and Gwynsu's. Blade of the Ruined King would be nice for those of you like the Redditor who like that item. Terminus would also be good for bonus sustain, Flicker Blade would be good for reducing your W cooldown, which is crucial, and Wild Arrows would be good for crit chance. Axiom Arc would also be brilliant for both regular and ultimate ability haste. Basically, you've got tons of options, just get your attack speed through the roof. If mana is needed, Manamune obviously. Rakan is versatile. So, go have fun murdering people as Rakan ADC. Just prepare to be flamed as always. Follow the untiltable Rakan mindset. So with that, that's all I wanted to say about Rakan, finally. Let's wrap up this, again, not so mini minisode. Rakan was released in 2017 alongside Xayah, making them the first dual champion release in several years, and in fact there hasn't been another dual champion release since. He is, in my opinion, super fun, and also has very well designed gameplay which hasn't had to be adjusted since his release, and which perfectly suits his dramatic fantasy. I started playing League in 2017, and although I have several champions I like playing enough to have ground up to Mastery 7 back when that meant anything, Rakan quickly became my favourite. For several years now, I have almost exclusively played AP Rakan mid, and I've mained Rakan for even longer than that. I like everything about him. His design, his kit, his personality and interactions, his animations, his story, and the mindset and dramatic fantasy you get into while playing him, going with the flow and helping others. He's versatile, supportive, chaotic, and he always makes you feel like a superhero. His versatility in which runes he can take, what he can build, and which roles he can be played in is another reason I love him. And I have lots and lots and lots of fun slapping people with Dark Harvest and watching them blow up. In this video, I've discussed the history of Rakan and my history with League and with him. I've also discussed my particular playstyle and given you a mini guide on how to play Rakan mid if you like playing the same way I do. I then discussed how he is played and or would be played in all other roles. The moral of the story is you just need to be untiltable because people will be upset. After all of that, I just hope you've gained an appreciation for Rakan and for the Rakan mid playstyle. Maybe by now you even love him as much as I do, but not as much as Xayah does. Yes, it is indeed a fact that all Xayah mains are obsessed with Rakan and Rakan mains, and all Rakan mains are obsessed with Xayah and Xayah mains. And that wraps up this minisode. Thanks for watching, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.